Kamala Harris is a blatant tool of white supremacy, and you don't have to be on a black empowerment kick to understand that. All you have to be is somebody who at least wants a politician who pretends to be consistent at least part of the time. Kamala Harris can't even manage that. The white media realizes that she's been recognized by intelligent black people as being a white supremacist stooge, and her track record is so deplorable, so inarguably inconsistent and reprehensible that they don't have any sort of defense for her, so instead they've decided to join her in the land of make-believe. They're writing propaganda pieces meant to make excuses for her horrible track record. Now, you've heard a lot about Kamala Harris, and we're going to go ahead and put this into a concise package for you listing her various crimes and corruption. This is hardly going to be exhaustive, but it should be more or less conclusive. Yes, Kamala Harris has been a blatant anti-black fascist her entire life, but as she tells it, it wasn't her fault. The devil made her do it. And what is the devil these days? Apparently not a person or individual, but rather San Francisco politics. San Francisco politics are totally dominated by white society, but the white media doesn't blame white politicians. Instead, they keep it vague. Take the white media, for example. The LA Times, right after Kamala announced that she was running for president, put out a puff piece meant to make her look tough. One of the main gripes that the Democrat voters have against Democratic politicians is that they're weak and they're not coming off strong like Donald Trump, and voters are not going to vote for somebody who's the same old mamby-pamby milquetoast politician. Well, the same duplicity goes for the white media. Their goal is not merely to toughen up Kamala Harris's resume, it's also meant to justify the anti-black war she's been fighting the last 25 years. The white media knows full well that someone's going to bring up her reprehensible record of breaking the law and imprisoning innocent people. In fact, it's going to be something she'll have to deal with several times. So before the issue comes up, the white media wants to frame Harris's malicious anti-black racism as being the necessary result of San Francisco politics. It wasn't Kamala's fault that she was defending every dirty cop in San Francisco. It wasn't her fault that she was defending 3 strikes. It wasn't her fault that she was opposed to legalizing marijuana when you know that the war on drugs is just a clumsy front for a war on black people. That's not her fault at all. It's the cutthroat political environment of San Francisco. She's just a product of her environment. She was just a creature of political necessity. They, in fact, not only maintain this, they try to portray her law-breaking as being just a mark of how tough she is. They're trying to take a deficit and turn it into a positive. She gave as good as she got, they wrote. Is this some sort of editorial? Because that's what it reads like. It reads like an endorsement for Kamala Harris, as if she wrote the article. Okay, so her political opponents made personal attacks on her. How did she give as good as she got? Did she make personal attacks on her opponents? Because that would be giving as good as you got. No, instead what the LA Times does is they list something completely unrelated. Kamala Harris was fined $34,000 for breaching a spending cap limit, which she had promised she wouldn't do. She broke the law and her word. Now, what makes black people think that she's going to be any different with us? And the white media tries to portray this as being a reason to vote for her? Well, really, when it comes to Kamala Harris, to use the old computer science expression, it's not a bug, it's a feature. The LA Times then goes on to claim Harris portrayed her entrance into politics not as personal ambition, but as a matter of dedication to fixing a political office that was so destructive. Gee, that sounds exactly like how Kamala Harris is trying to justify her run for president. This isn't about her climbing the political ladder. She's concerned about families, don't you know? You see, this is about saving the country from a reckless and irresponsible president. You know who else used this exact same ploy? Barack Obama back in 2004 when he was running for the Senate. He was repeatedly asked by the white media if he would serve out his entire Senate term before seeking higher office, since it was obvious that John Kerry was going to lose the 2004 presidential election, and on all the Sunday talk shows that Barack Obama went on, he promised that he would serve out his entire senatorial term before even considering running for the presidency. Well, as we all know, only 2 years into a 6-year term, Obama announced his candidacy for president. It was obvious he was going to spend more time out on the road, more time in New Orleans, more time in front of the cameras looking for photo opportunities than he did in D.C. It was obvious what he was going to do, and what reason did he give to justify his sudden change of heart? The country was on the wrong track economically and politically, devastated by wars of choice and bad fiscal policies, and Obama, in his infinite selflessness and mercy, had to run for the presidency to save the country from these reckless and irresponsible policies. That's how it is with the self-centered politician. It's not about me, it's about you. So Kamala hasn't bothered to update her political playbook at all. She's still running the same plays from 20 years ago and pursuing the same anti-black agenda. The LA Times article goes on to take an excerpt from her book in which she says that the DA's office was being hamstrung by her predecessor. The DAs were undervalued and feeling stymied, and worse, violent felons were allowed to walk free. Now, it needs to be noted that Kamala Harris' first foray into politics was stabbing the man who hired her for the DA's office in the back. That's how Kamala Harris started her political career. So even if you're white, you really can't afford to turn your back on her. As I mentioned in last week's Sunday address, in 2010, Kamala Harris was accused by San Francisco's public defender of deliberately withholding evidence on dirty cops that could have gotten innocent people out of prison. Cops whose testimony and investigations led to innocent people being put behind bars for crimes they didn't commit. The Supreme Court said that Kamala Harris had to turn the cops' names over, but Harris refused, saying that the police's privacy was more important than the law. Now, the public defender wasn't demanding the cops hand over their social security numbers or give their home addresses or phone numbers or the names of relatives and family members. They simply wanted the police's service records, which, by the way, should be public access for everyone. That should be public record. Everyone should be able to find out exactly what any police officer, sheriff's deputy, state police, and FBI agent's service record is, and especially how many times they've been cited for brutality, how many times for falsifying evidence, how many contempt of court citations. The public should be able to know who the hell is out here allegedly upholding the law. The public should be able to see who's been accused of breaking the law or breaking police department policy. Kamala Harris didn't side with the public, though. She sided with the police. The public defender demanded that if Harris wasn't going to comply with the law, at the very least, she ought to show what prosecutor's policy she was using to justify breaking the law. He called her refusal to cite policy unethical if she couldn't even tell what rules of her own office that she was sticking to. Harris admitted that there was no policy at her prosecutor's office that justified her not releasing the names of dirty cops. She simply said that she was just refusing to do it. So under Kamala Harris, the police have a right to violate the law. The police are not to be held to any standard if Kamala Harris has anything to say about it, and it's not me who said it, Kamala Harris said it. And she went to court to enforce this right. So when Kamala Harris talks about violent criminals walking free, she ought to know she was the one protecting the violent criminals and making sure the law never touched them. And that was just how lawless Harris was as a San Francisco DA. When she became California Attorney General, she became a lot worse, because as Attorney General, she went to court to try to get nonprofits, in this case Americans for Prosperity, to be forced to hand over their donor list. And what was the justification for this action? Because Kamala Harris's office said they wanted to investigate whether there was any self-dealing or improper loan. So when the public defender demands that Kamala Harris turn over the names of dirty cops who were deliberately sending innocent people to jail, Kamala Harris goes to court and declares that a cop has a right to conceal their dirty service record. But when Kamala sees an opportunity to undermine a political opponent, she demands that private individuals and groups hand over their list of donors to her, not because a crime has been committed, not because anyone has been hurt, but because she wants to go over their list and see who's on it. To Kamala Harris, dirty cops' records of breaking the law are sacrosanct. On the other hand, you and my list of friends and supporters and donors, well, that's fair game. For Kamala Harris, public safety means nothing. Her political advantage, on the other hand, means everything. She wants the police to be solidly in her corner. She'll do anything to make sure that happens, not because she has some special love for the thugs in blue, but because she loves all that down and dirty, filthy stuff that they do. She wasn't a prosecutor in spite of police corruption. She was there specifically to promote and enhance and push police corruption. And, as I also reported to you long ago in the deadly deception of Kamala Harris's corruption as California Attorney General was so egregious that she soon found her office having to answer to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals for what one of the justices called lying prosecutors, and one judge even went so far as to call out the corrupt California judges who refuse to punish prosecutors who break the law, prosecutors like Kamala Harris. So understand that Kamala Harris is not some rogue prosecutor who was going after people without anyone knowing it. She was the chosen attack dog of white power who made sure to protect their felonious activities on the behalf of white power. Her entire shtick, at least with the people, is, let me tell you how terrible Trump is. She's not bringing anybody any tangibles. She's not going to declare war on police violence against black people. It's just going to be her clumsy attempts at flowery speeches and soaring rhetoric. Empty, insincere words. But when it comes to dirty cops, oh, she's going to be going to the mat for that. She's going to war for them. What about 3 strikes? Well, she can't support taking 3 strikes off the books, because look at how profitable it's been. So she goes to court for the cops, goes to court for 3 strikes, but stays home for everything else. And don't you dare tell me that I shouldn't call Kamala Harris a political whore. That's not name-calling. It's a statement of fact. Because when she was still an assistant DA, she began dating then California Assemblyman and future mayor of San Francisco, low-down Willie Brown. This was back in 1995, by the way, before a lot of you were even born. Harris bitterly resents it whenever someone points out that she was romantically involved with a man 30 years her senior, old enough to be her dad or even her grandfather, a man who just so happens to be one of the most politically connected people in the state. Everything with her is a political decision, not because I said so, but because she said so. After all, as the LA Times was forced to note, Kamala herself said in her book, "Politics has been something I've been doing for a long time. It didn't just drop out of a tree and all of a sudden I took a look at it. It was already in my blood." So there you have it, straight from the horse's mouth. Her political ambitions wasn't something that she stumbled into. It wasn't some moral crusade either. It wasn't because she saw institutional corruption and horrible policies being enacted. Kamala Harris's entire career in government has been one nonstop parade of corruption and horrible policies. She's not running against Trump for the people. As with everything else in Kamala Harris's life, she's only running for herself. And her cozying up with Willie Brown clearly wasn't true love. It was just yet another cold, clinical, ruthless political calculation by a woman who spent her entire life using people. San Francisco is a political machine, just like Chicago and New York, and part of political machines is giving people patronage jobs. These are basically money-for-nothing posts that the politicians hand over to their family members or as political favors to this or that connected interested party. In this case, Willie Brown gave Kamala Harris not 1 but 2 do-nothing jobs, which gave her an extra $100,000 a year for nothing, and nobody ever asked how an allegedly full-time assistant DA could possibly lock up innocent black people all day long and then take on not 1 but 2 more city jobs. Where does she find the time for all that? Nobody asked, and yet she was paid $100,000 for jobs that she had no experience at and no training for, and which no one can tell us what she even did in either post. No one can say what she even did in either of these 2 non-jobs. Nobody has any memories of her doing anything there, but that didn't stop Willie Brown from giving Kamala Harris $100,000 of taxpayer money anyway. $100,000 a year for 2 part-time positions, not even full-time positions. Part-time positions, which, let's be honest, didn't involve her putting in 25 hours a week at either one of them. We all know she stuck her head in the door once every blue moon or whenever the mood hit so that she could say she had been there, and then afterwards it was off to the courthouse to railroad black people into prison. So these 2 part-time appointments are exactly what they look like. A slimy politician using taxpayer dollars to pay his mistress, Kamala Harris, so that she'll stay in bed with him. This woman is a political prostitute in every sense of the word, and Willie Brown made sure that the taxpayers weren't the only ones Kamala was getting money from. As he was leaving office, he made sure Kamala was plugged in with the San Francisco political machine, which, as a former Politico said, it's a club that comes instantly with the entire business community at your doorstep, giving the chosen tool access to large amounts of campaign money and institutional political support. It's that simple. That simple indeed. So you see, Kamala Harris's rise was not by chance. She was chosen. And the support that she gets from the white media and white society in power isn't because they think that she's something special. It's because she's shown that she will loyally serve their interest, whether it's in office or in the bedroom. Though I would be the first to ask if there's anyone else who Harris was making pillow talk with over the years, given her dalliances with old Willie Brown. It's a fair question. As Attorney General, no one can think of any prosecutions of police that Kamala Harris has ever carried out. Not even one. She certainly never mentioned them in her campaign ads. As a slap in the face of black people, she said all she would do regarding police would be sensitivity training. So black parents of kids who skip school get a fine and jail time. But the cops who frame innocent people, who falsify police reports, and who kill people, they get Kamala Harris's full protection and support. And at worst, they may have to attend sensitivity training. You know, racist cops laugh at that kind of thing. They laugh with joy because they like the fact that they get a chump like Kamala Harris who's going to make sure that they can kill at will. Problem is, the racist cops aren't the only ones laughing. In 2014, when State Attorney General Harris was running for re-election, her Republican opponent announced that he was in favor of legalizing marijuana. Now, when Kamala Harris was asked if she agreed with that, She laughed it off, literally. She dismissed the entire issue with a "he's entitled to his opinion" and a laugh. This wasn't because she thought legalizing marijuana was laughable. It's because she fully understands the drug war to really be a war on black people. And if anyone expects her to stop her war on black people, well, she thinks that's just ridiculous. Now today, Kamala Harris is singing a different tune, but Kamala's change of heart regarding marijuana wasn't because she finally figured out what a racist fraud the drug war is. It's because she was seeking higher office, and she wanted to be able to lie to black people nationwide and tell us all that she was against marijuana staying illegal, but she will never say that the war on drugs was merely a war on black people. And the white media won't make an issue of her flip-flop on that either, because their job is to justify and promote the policies of white supremacy, and Kamala Harris's policy of 3 strikes being fiercely enforced would eventually come back to haunt her sooner than she thought. In 2011, California's prisons were so full and overflowing that the Supreme Court itself deemed it to be a violation of the Constitution's Cruel and Unusual Punishments Clause. Now, when the Supreme Court hands down a ruling, that's supposed to be the end of the issue, right? Well, not for Kamala Harris it wasn't, because in 2014 she went to court to fight the federal judicial court's order that California make nonviolent second strike prisoners eligible for parole after serving half their sentences. The Supreme Court was more interested in alleviating California's overcrowded prisons than Kamala Harris was. Understand that. California's prisons even today are bursting to overflowing. You go to practically any courthouse in California and you see just this non-stop flow of prisoners coming into and out of the courthouse. It never ceases. And it's not just San Francisco, Los Angeles, and San Diego. It's not just the big population centers. It's practically the whole damn state. And what was Kamala Harris's justification for defying a federal court order? Her office said that the prisons would lose their free labor. She didn't make a public safety argument because, of course, nonviolent offenders means that they're not a public safety risk. Instead, Kamala Harris's argument was that the state is entitled to its slaves. That's spoken just like a plantation owner for the 19th century. Now, ain't that interesting? Kamala Harris is fully willing to fight to the death in court for the police and to hold prisoners as slave labor, but not for anything that would benefit black people. When questioned during her announcement speech at Howard University, Kamala carelessly dismissed her racist track record, trying to play it as though it was someone else's fault.
So I was, as you are rightly pointing out, the Attorney General of California for 2 terms, and I had a host of clients that I was obligated to defend and represent, and I couldn't fire my clients. And there were, unfortunately, situations that occurred where my clients took positions that were contrary to my beliefs. And it was an office of a lot of people who would do the work on a daily basis. And do I wish that sometimes they would have personally consulted me before they wrote the things that they wrote? Yes, I do. But the bottom line is the buck stops with me. And I take full responsibility for what my...
Oh, so she was obligated to represent the illegal institutions and policies of California. She was obligated to keep corrupt cops' records of abuse and corruption away from defendants who these cops were framing for crimes they didn't commit. She was obligated to hide the corrupt records of police from the public who they were endangering. She was obligated to deny a federal court's order demanding the release of nonviolent prisoners, obligated to demand private citizens hand over their lists of supporters, while she fights tooth and nail to keep her own list of dirty cops secret. She didn't have a choice, she said, and it's not like she could fire her clients. She said she had to do it. Very strange that she would say that, because after Proposition 8 passed in California, which outlawed gay marriage, Attorney General Kamala Harris refused to defend that law. She wouldn't go to court for it. She said, "I'm not doing it. I'm not going to court." And it wasn't that she didn't know that Proposition 8 was facing a federal court challenge. It was because she herself went in front of the cameras and refused to defend the state law that the voters of California themselves put on the books. The voters put that law on the books, and Kamala Harris said, "I looked at it, and far as I'm concerned, it's not legal." Now, she claimed that she's obligated to represent her clients, but what possible client can the Attorney General have more important than the voters who put her into office? She also lamely tried to claim that she doesn't always agree with her clients' views. Well, she did more than just disagree with the voters of California on Proposition 8. She defied them. She told them, I will not stand up for this measure. It means nothing to me. So Kamala Harris has always picked and chosen what issues she wants to defend and which ones she chooses to refuse. So when she gives you that I was obligated crap, don't you buy it. It's like everything else Kamala Harris has ever said. It's a lie. She is a pathological liar, and not even a very good one. Anticipating that she'll have to answer for her other courtroom corruption, she went on to say, I wish they, talking about her lawyers on the staff, would have personally consulted with me. That's it. She doesn't show any outrage. Innocent people in prison, laws broken, her office forced to pay money for all this corruption that she engaged in, and she's not upset about that, even in the least. All she has to say is, I just wish they would have consulted me. You got these guys sitting here in California, of all places, not in the Deep South, not Mississippi, not Louisiana, not Texas, but in California, defending the state's right to own slaves, and doing it in Kamala Harris's name, which she shows no outrage, no anger about. You would have thought that as Attorney General, she would have prosecuted somebody. She knew about this years ago, by the way. This is not something that just popped up this week when she announced her candidacy for president. BuzzFeed did an article about her years ago. She's known about it for years and hasn't done anything about it. Not once did she say these people who she had working for her, that they were wrong. They were wrong to do what they did. She just casually says, I wish they had informed me. So we see what her defense of her actions is going to be. She's just going to say over and over again, I didn't know, they did it without my knowledge. So her office is being dragged in the federal court. Her lawyers are defending contempt of court on the grounds that they need slaves. And she didn't know. She had an interview with BuzzFeed where she said she was shocked to learn that her office was fighting in court to keep black people as illegal slave labor. Shocked, she said. You know who that reminds me of? It reminds me of the police chief from the movie Casablanca, simply shocked to learn that there was gambling going on in a casino. She brushed off BuzzFeed's questions with an insincere plea of ignorance and an even more insincere vow to investigate. That was years ago, mind you. By the way, does anyone know whatever came of Kamala Harris's alleged investigation? Did she find any wrongdoing in her attorney general's office? Did anyone get punished? Did anyone even so much as get fired? And notice how she doesn't contest or disagree that her office fought the Supreme Court in order to not have to release nonviolent offenders. She doesn't deny it. She doesn't argue that point. She doesn't question it at all. So she concedes that the argument was indeed about nonviolent prisoners. Her only feeble defense was she said she wanted to investigate whether her representative had actually said the California prisons needed the free labor. So she wants to have a war of words. You see, that's going to be Kamala Harris's strategy. When confronted on her racist record, she didn't do it, her staff did. So much for the buck stops with me. Now, if this woman is totally oblivious to what's happening in her own DA's office, on her own Attorney General's staff, then it would be asinine to give her the nuclear codes. If she can't even control an Attorney General's office, then she has no chance in hell of controlling the biggest, most intricate bureaucracy in human history. Yet she bizarrely touts her experience as Attorney General as making her suited to run the executive branch. Because she's so good at controlling her office, don't you know? Well, the black community isn't the California courts. We're not going to rubber stamp her crimes. We're going to hold her accountable for them. And saying I didn't know won't be a defense. And understand that there is no appeal from the black community's verdicts. That's not going to stop the white media from trying to run interference for her anyway. The white media is hoping to drown us out by saturating as many outlets as they can with as many puff pieces and phony praise articles about Kamala Harris as possible. They understand exactly how bad her record is, that it's not going the way she's wanting it to. She doesn't want to be questioned about it. What they're hoping to do is that for every one time she gets called out, hopefully they can flood the zone with 3 or 4 articles saying how great Kamala is. The white media is not going to mention her political prostitution. They won't demand that she answer for protecting dirty cops the same way the white media protects racist police and the politicians who refuse to prosecute them. So they're going to protect Kamala Harris. She's shown that she's on their team, and no less than clowns like Howard Dean, the former head of the Democratic National Committee, decided that he was going to attack Brother Tariq by name on Twitter. Howard Dean was the architect of the Democrats' short-lived 50-state strategy. So the fact that he's taking shots at the new voices of black media, that just proves that what we're saying here is resonating. Make no mistake. The kind of stuff that we're talking about here is percolating, it's circulating, it's getting out there. They're hearing it. And they hate it, especially at this crucial moment, because they need black people to get back on board with the political fraud of American democracy. And the black media is not merely making it difficult, but in some ways we're threatening to make it impossible, because black people have gotten fed up. A critical mass of black people have finally gotten fed up with the old game of trying to bring out a Bakari Sellers, or a Barack Obama to sing a little Al Green, or say institutional racism needs to stop. All of these innocuous nothing praises the white liberals came up with as just words to distract us while white supremacy marches on, that's getting shoved aside. And we're the ones shoving it aside. Their tactics didn't just fall. We knocked them over, and white supremacy saw them get knocked over. Howard Dean for years has tried to make a good song and dance out of his own liberal credentials, but as soon as you question white supremacy's latest tool, look what his reaction was. Howard Dean wasn't out there doing this against George W. Bush. He wasn't out there doing this against Donald Trump. When's the last time or any time that he told Donald Trump to, shut up? He didn't do that with Trump, but he will do that against black people now, won't he? So for those of you out there thinking that the Democratic leadership can perhaps be redeemed, Howard Dean used to be the leader of the Democratic Party, and this is what he does. When we tell you the Democrats and Republicans are just two wings of the same white supremacist bird, we mean it literally. The white media knows that Kamala Harris absolutely of a necessity requires, she crucially needs the black vote if she's going to get the nomination on her own. More than that, the Democrats need black voters to turn out in numbers if they're going to have a chance in hell of beating Trump. They need a candidate who can deliver the black vote. The black community has tried supporting the Republicans, and then after that tried supporting the Democrats, and neither resulted in our empowerment. If the black community disengages from both political parties, then black empowerment will be the only course of action left for us. This would constitute the greatest political realignment that this country has seen since the Civil War. Black people will stop listening to either white political party, and that means black people by default will be listening to voices like ours, a political constituency finally radically opposed to white domination and hell-bent on black empowerment. This is the scenario white power has fought to stave off since 1865, so they need black people to get back on board with the political fraud of American democracy. We're making that hard for them. Already Bakari Sellers, and now Howard Dean are taking direct shots at us because we're loud enough to be heard now. And while they tried to put a pretty face on their failure to re-engage the black vote in 2018, we now see what they've really been thinking. They were confused and angry at the low black voter turnout, that black people are disengaging, and it's not for nothing. They understand that the black voter turnout wasn't merely dampened last year, somebody made it to be that way, and it wasn't political purges at the polls. It wasn't purging the voter rolls. Somebody in the black community was saying, you know what? We don't need to bother. See, that's how they keep people on the treadmill. With these phony baloney controversies, the Democrats and Republicans pretend to be fighting about something. We'll fight about the wall. We'll fight about purging black voters. What they're really doing is putting on a show meant to distract you, to make you think that somebody's fighting for your stake in a game where you don't have anything in it to begin with. A game that you lose no matter who wins. That's what they're there for. They're going to put on a show and say, you got somebody representing you. See, they're representing you. When they're actually representing the well-heeled, deeply entrenched white interests. And we're calling that out. They see that it's black people who are influencing the discourse around a major party contender. You got somebody seeking the presidency, and it's no longer a matter of Democrats, Republicans, or innocuous phrases about constituencies. It's coming down to the black community defining whether or not somebody gets to run for president. They're not used to that. They're used to black people who try to run for office having white power say, we're not going to vote for you, and that's that. They're used to white media having some black puppets who say, oh, you can't vote for so-and-so. You got to vote for this person over here. Don't listen to those people. They're too far to the left. They're too radical. They're out of the mainstream. And leading black people to the loving arms of Hillary's super predator Clinton. That's what they're used to. They're not used to black people showing that we can call hands, exercising power over white interest or over white power's puppets. They're not used to that. They don't like it. It scares them. We've gone from merely decreasing the black turnout during an election cycle to now making it where candidates have to pass a black empowerment litmus test. And if you fail our litmus test, the new voices of black media will make sure you never become a candidate. This was something that they didn't want to ever see. They can control Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She's there for the same song and dance. Don't you go kidding yourself either. She's basically a 21st century beatnik. But when it comes to what we're doing, this actually threatens white supremacy. It threatens their power. And the first power has always been the ability to exclude those who you don't want at the table. What's happening is, you've got the new voices of black media proving that, yeah, if you don't watch your step, we just might exclude your little tool from the table. They've already made it clear they need the black vote to get back on board. But that's become a lot more difficult because these guys online keep telling black people not to do it. And the black people are listening to them and not the white media. Don't expect the white media to admit that we put some pain on them. Not yet anyway. Their MO is going to be to declare us sexist. And before it's all over, they're going to be declaring us terrorists. They can't risk giving us a platform. Even mentioning us is too dangerous. Howard Dean's probably kicking himself right now and going, you know what? I don't know if I want to be getting into a spitball contest with people like Tariq and the rest of the black media, because every time I do that, I get closer to having to actually mention their issues. So I'm not going to give their interests any more attention. We need these guys to be seen as the fringe. They're putting on a show for black people's benefit. They're hoping that black people are going to become complacent again. That's what they don't understand. We've already reached the right number of black people in the right places. If you think that you're going to get on Twitter and counter-program with a few tweets, you're smoking something stronger than marijuana. We've proven that we're the ones who speak for the streets, and it's the streets that you need to turn out for you. But we're telling the streets, nah, we're sitting this one out until black is on the ballot. Kamala Harris sitting here being asked, what are you going to do to help increase the black voter turnout? Well, it's about everybody. It's about everyone. Well, in that case, you go ahead and ask everyone to turn out for you then, Kamala. Don't come to black people. Just go ahead and hold some know-nothing rally in some know-nothing place. She goes to Howard University on MLK Day, and she's talking about how important Howard University is to her and how mothers in Compton would ask for her advice. But I'm here to represent everyone, she says. Okay, in that case, you need to go ahead and do that, because black folks are looking for somebody who's representing us. And if you fail the political litmus test that the new voices of black media put in front of you, then you can give up ever holding the presidency, at least if you're a Democrat. But how long before the black media and the black empowerment movement that we represent get to the point where it's going to be a matter of, maybe we might want to exercise a little bit of influence on the other side of the political aisle? May not be able to necessarily stop such and such person from getting the nomination, but we can certainly stop them from holding office. The swing vote does decide who leads the nation. Black people wield that swing vote, but don't expect the white media to make too much hay out of that. Instead, the most that they'll do is talk about so-called identity politics, which is usually just code for LGBT. Well, black is not identity politics. You talk about black, it comes to how we look at some tangibles on the table. And by the way, while the white media is basically trying to figure out how to talk around us, they have taken to the tactic of trying to use other groups as proxies for us. Other groups who are nowhere near as cohesive as we are. Other groups who don't threaten white supremacy. That's what they've been trying to call themselves attacking. It's supposed to be a proxy for us. Reuters put out a story earlier today talking about the backlash against Kamala Harris that they noted a hashtag called Kamala is a cop was beginning to trend on Twitter after she announced her campaign. But not surprisingly, the San Francisco Chronicle put out what was nothing more than a wet, sloppy kiss for Harris, but you can tell the real audience for their tripe was black people. Nothing like a bunch of lily-white racists in California trying to dictate black people's opinions to us. In this so-called article, the white media admits that black votes will be key to winning the 2020 election, so Kamala Harris is trying to make inroads in the South. This was the white media trying to tell themselves some feel-good fantasies, that Kamala Harris is winning over black people in the South. They're trying to convince themselves that they still got everything under control, that nothing's changed. Sure, they had some black guys over there causing problems, but things will go on as they always have. We just have to give Kamala as big a push as we possibly can, and the black vote will buy into it and turn out. And who do they point to as one of the people clarifying Harris's appeal to black voters? None other than Bakari's sellout. Ain't that something? You got a guy here who failed to get the black vote for his own election, a guy who isn't even in political office because the voters didn't want him, and now he's going to be someone who the San Francisco Chronicle is pointing to because he failed to get the black vote, and that qualifies him to talk about how to get the black vote. But it's obvious this entire political ad for Harris was aimed at black people. It does nothing but mention the one or two passing contacts that Harris has had with the black community, and the white media tries to play that up. The story has this air of desperation to it that's almost tangible. They mention that Harris went to Howard University, and then that she was a sorority sister there, and that sororities are the backbone of the black community. Now, you can tell that these are some white DNC advisors who are hoping to stroke the egos of black female voters if they can manage it. They've already looked and seen that black men are speaking out against Kamala Harris, and they're looking and saying, well, we have to figure out if we can supplement that by getting out as many black women to vote as possible. But black women aren't going for the Kool-Aid either. The white media is talking nice about black sororities, never mind the fact that these black Greek fraternities and sororities both are full and overflowing, just infested with a bunch of sellouts and professional butt kissers. These black Greeks, they've been one of the worst banes on our community. These guys think that there's some sort of talented 10th. As far as they're concerned, they're supposed to be the only prosperous group in the black community. That's how they see it. They got their private club, and it's going to be for them, and they're going to be an auxiliary of white supremacy. The black community has no love for these black Greeks because they have no love for the black community. But the white media does know that they think that they can spend all their time around their pet black bootlicks, that this is the black community. And while they were trying not to discuss Kamala's obvious inability to connect with black voters, the San Francisco Chronicle story cited one woman who said that she was looking for a candidate who would be for the people. In the San Francisco Chronicle, they were complaining about how ironic it was that the woman didn't know that that was Kamala Harris's campaign slogan. Well, that tells you just how poor a job she's doing at her own PR. She's sitting here talking about for the people, and the black folks are sitting there going, is there anybody around who's for the people? That lets you know just how low esteem the Kamala Harris is held in. The white media noticed that, and while the San Francisco Chronicle was so worried that black voters didn't know Kamala Harris's campaign slogan, nowhere in their puff piece do they mention her track record of locking up black people. They don't mention anything that would make it where, if you do hear about Kamala Harris, you probably wouldn't like what you hear. Her illegal refusal to tell the public who the dirty cops in their districts are, no mention about how in the era of Black Lives Matters this might be a problem for her. They don't mention that at all. They just pretend like it didn't happen, because black people don't care about police brutality or corruption, don't you know? And the white media in the San Francisco Chronicle also didn't mention how she used her office to go after the black parents of truant children, which in the black community means black women. The black community has a disproportionate number of single mothers, so when a politician calls themselves going after the parents, quote-unquote, of truant children, that means that there's a 75 to 80% chance it's going to be a black mother that they're going after, but the San Francisco Chronicle didn't mention how this could be a problem for Kamala, just like Reuters didn't mention it. After all, they're trying to appeal to black female voters, and telling them that Kamala Harris likes to lock up black women might be a problem. They're talking around the issue instead. They're trying to fool people into thinking, see, we're addressing it, and Kamala, she's addressed it too. She's addressed nothing. People like Bakari's sellout don't speak for the streets. It's pointless to talk to him, or some sorority sisters of Kamala Harris's, or some other sorority alumni. It's pointless to talk to these clowns. The white media must be truthful about how worried they are. The black voters don't know anything about Harris. But their true fear isn't that black people don't know. It's that somebody might actually educate them about her before the white media gets a chance to spread their disinformation. If black voters don't know about Kamala Harris, then that means the white media's carpet bombing of pro-Kamala publicity hasn't been reaching black voters, and they've been trying. They've been plastering her picture and good news about Kamala Harris every chance they get, yet for some damn reason the black voters haven't been seeing it. They know Harris isn't convincing more black voters to go to the polls, so the same sorry number who went last year, there's probably going to be even less of them this year, because it's not as if Kamala Harris is energizing new people to come into the process. She's not getting the black vote out. It's just a matter of, can she keep the few black people still willing to go to the polls awake? All she has are the same old group of worn-out black retirees and near elderly. She's basically got the 65 to dead demo on lock. Problem is, that's not the bulk of the black electorate anymore. She's got the black baby boomers and they're dying out. She doesn't have the ear of the young black voters. Hell, she doesn't even have the ear of the middle-aged black voters. And she's getting hit from all sides by Generation X and even some of the black millennials. In other words, the very people she needs to turn out for her. See, Obama won the presidency because he got young black people to turn out. The way things are going for Kamala Harris, though, she won't be doing her next campaign rally from Howard University or from Oakland. Instead, she'll be doing it from a retirement home. The few black people who are still willing to vote for a Democrat, even a shill like Kamala Harris, they're not motivated to listen to the white media outlets. That's the reason why all the carpet bombing of the publicity for her hasn't translated into elevated name recognition for her. At this point, she's supposed to have some sort of higher public profile, especially among black people, but they're not more aware of her. They don't know anything about her, and that means that while black voters do want to learn about her background, obviously, even the older ones, they don't want to get their information from a white media outlet like the San Francisco Chronicle. And the fear of the white media is that these black voters are going to learn about her from the new voices of black media. The white media doesn't want that, and that wasn't the only media fraud going on. The white media also talked to other black nobody sorority types, predictably all of them certified that Kamala Harris is authentic and genuine. Now you're saying those words, but is that supposed to be making black folks think, we can trust her, she's authentic and genuine? Yeah, in other words, all the things that we've been saying she's not. She is inauthentic, she is disingenuous. They know that we're talking about her like a dog, or rather we're talking about her like a white supremacist. They know that the impression of the black street about her is negative, and if they think that putting some of these paid bootlicks out there to say she's all right, she's one of us is going to work, they're just painting their own reality. Apparently, the white media is hoping people will fall for the political equivalent of a Jedi mind trick. You love Kamala Harris. She is real and authentic and genuine. We love Kamala Harris. She is real and authentic and genuine. To hear the San Francisco Chronicle tell it, nobody in the black community had heard about the scandals involving her time in San Francisco as a DA or a California Attorney General, and they weren't about to ask any black people about that either. And by the way, I'm well aware that Sean King has called himself endorsing Kamala Harris. Well, I guess Angela Rye ain't the only one hoping for some administration job. But this is what the white media is doing. This is who they're trotting out. A whole bunch of bootlick suckers and sellouts. This is turning out to be a lie detector test for the black community. Those who said they were in favor of black empowerment, now that it comes time for them to go after Kamala Harris, after it comes time to expose her, we're seeing the folks who actually meant what they said, as opposed to the ones who were just saying it because they were in front of us. And now they think they spy an opportunity to go turncoat again, like they did in 2008 and 2012. Yeah, we're finding out who's the truth tellers and who are the liars. We're finding out, and you can see these people who write this garbage, that's canonizing and lionizing Kamala Harris. They're clearly a bunch of hideously out-of-touch white people who think that rap music videos that they've seen or the church pastors who they've watched on TV makes them experts on black people. That's what's happening here. You got a bunch of racist white liberals, mind you, who are talking to and treating black people as if we're just a bunch of pickaninnies on a freaking plantation. At no point does the white media article from anyone, doesn't matter if it's the New York Times, doesn't matter if it's the San Francisco Chronicle, at no point does anyone say what it is that Kamala Harris is going to deliver. No political promises, no political platform, just a bunch of empty platitudes from a woman who nobody knows anything about. She has no brand because she has no identity, and she can't build one either. We don't know anything about her political platform, and what we do know about her past makes us want to puke. She has not said a single word about what she's going to do. She hasn't said that she's going to do the very things that black people say they want, and whenever you mention black to her, she immediately says, everybody, everybody. You know it's about everybody. You know they never go to the Latinos and say that when they want something, well, we got to do for everybody. When they go to white folks, if they go to everybody else, they start talking about what's in it for them specifically. They go to white working class families, you know, the forgotten man, etc. They tell them what they're going to get. They don't go talking about everybody. On the other hand, whenever they're in front of black people, they make sure real quick before you can even say, well, what are you going to bring to black people? Before you can even finish the sentence, they're already saying, it's about everybody. It's about everybody. But what about the black community? It's about everybody. You know, we're not going to be putting anybody into any boxes because you see, what the mother in Compton is concerned about is the same thing that the mother in Kentucky is concerned about. Yeah, you want to go ahead and say Kentucky because you look to some good white Southerners down there, so we don't want to look as if we're going to offend the racist vote. See, there's never a circumstance under which we can offend the racist vote. Why don't you talk about what it is that black people need and what it is you're going to produce for the black community? Well, because we don't want to look at the racist and make them think that we're singling them out. That's who she's there to represent. Her racist track record shows this. We don't get to argue about this. We don't get to debate whether or not Kamala Harris has been a lifelong operative of white supremacy. Her record proves that she's been that her entire adult life. Please show me where she's actually denied it. All she said is, people were doing stuff in the prosecutor's office when I was the boss, and I swear to you I don't know anything about it. I totally didn't know anything about it, just like Obama, who refused to actually address black people's concerns. He addressed black aspirations, which is just another way of saying that he gave us the chance to live vicariously through him, and we all saw what that was worth. But make no mistake, we got white supremacy shook. We got the white powers that be shook, because what's happening is they're facing a circumstance where black people are actually exercising influence over the elections for our own benefit. All of y'all out there, some of whom should have known better, were talking about, we can't afford to stay home, we can't afford to stay home, what about the racists? And I've told you the most powerful thing you can do is show that the black vote is disengaging because it sends a message. There was this constituency who used to be the most engaged, but now they're looking to leave. This is all a fraud over here, and our group is no longer going to remain engaged with a process designed to ignore us. But withdrawing is simply part of what we're going to do. Ultimately, the goal is a reorganization. That's what white power is scared of. Angry black voters deciding to pull a strategic withdrawal so that we can rally the troops and organize a political realignment. This time we come out swinging for ourselves and not as a bunch of flunkies for a white supremacist fraud calling itself the Democrats. That's why it's so important for us to speak with our own voice, to make it clear that black people are pulling back and staying out of the process because A, we don't believe in it, and B, we've decided that the process needs to change and that we need to exert control over it. And now they see what's happening to Kamala Harris. We've got the black vote not merely saying we're not going to vote for this fraud, but also telling the reason why. We're going to put black on the ballot, and we will punish those who refuse to because they know what the problem is today. We're saying that we're going to punish Kamala Harris for having attacked black people for 25 years, and we're going to do it, and we're going to put an end to her political dreams and delusions precisely because she isn't putting black on the ballot. What they also know is, if it goes this way, whoever the Democrat nominee turns out to be will also face the exact same opposition on the exact same grounds. Same thing we're saying about Kamala Harris, you can easily say about Hillary Clinton, or about Bernie Sanders, or about Cory Booker, or Elizabeth What's-Her-Name, or any of the other fakers, frauds, and phonies of the Democrats. You can easily say it about all of them. And if the black community speaks in one voice and destroys the political aspirations of a candidate, then what happens when the Democrats call themselves running a candidate nationally? A white one, of course. Then they're going to receive the exact same treatment, and it becomes, the black vote just put an end to the election before it even began. The black vote decides who goes to Washington and who doesn't. And the black vote is saying, you don't get our vote unless you bring tangibles. Well, we can't allow that kind of precedent. The black vote made it clear. We're not doing a damn thing for anybody, not lifting a finger to vote or even speak on anyone's behalf unless you bring some tangibles. And those tangibles are not going to be showing us your dance moves. To hell with your dance moves. This isn't Soul Train. That's the problem that they have. White supremacists have always been good at looking 10 miles down the road to see what's coming. They know exactly what kind of a precedent we're threatening to set here, and they know where this leads, and they want to head it off before it gets there. What we have done, you should not underestimate. I want you to see things from the perspective of your enemy because he's seen how the new voices of black media in only a few years have gone from being a total non-entity to being a minor pest last year to an annoyance and now to what seems to be a viable political threat. Black people are supposed to be powerless. We're not supposed to act or think for ourselves, and we shouldn't have the ability to actually influence anything. That's how white supremacy stays comfortable. Black people can't actually do anything. It doesn't matter how unhappy you are. You know you'll make a little bit of noise and then things go back to the way they always were. You're not going to change anything. We make sure you can't because you're powerless. And now what's happening is we're organizing our vote. We may not have the dollars, but we actually have something that's just as good. At the end of the day, the politicians collect all of those hundreds of millions of dollars because they think that those dollars are going to get them votes. So we've shown that what's going to have to actually happen is you of a necessity have to come to the black community with some tangibles. The very thing that black people have never been demanding organized until now. No excuses. Don't give us how you ain't got it or how it's about everybody. This is a worst case scenario for white power. The Obamas and the roly-poly Martins and the Joy Reids and the Kamala Harrises and the Bakari sellouts, black surrogates for white power whose job it is to contain black outrage and to focus our anger in a different direction away from white supremacy and to mislead us in the direction of white power wants us to go, the new voices of black media have successfully turned Kamala's assets into liabilities. Oh, I was a DA, she says. I was the Indian American or Asian American DA of San Francisco, Attorney General of California, and now she's running away from all of that. We've taken her assets and turned them into liabilities with the very constituency that she most needs the support of. And her going to Howard, that makes her subsequent war on black people all the more egregious. You went to a school for black people let you into one of their universities, they let you lead one of their groups, gave you your start in politics. And this is what you do? If it wasn't for black people, Kamala Harris wouldn't even be a senator, much less Attorney General of California. Wouldn't have been a DA either, if it wasn't for black people making her so. And then she turns around and uses the position that black people gave her to attack those very same black people. And it says a lot about the corrupt and crumbling boule political class of black folks. Even after everything Kamala Harris has done to attack black people, they're still out there trying to help her gain the highest office in the land. They care more about getting a pat on the head from white supremacy than they do their own survival, which is the reason why these idiots, they're already on the bullet train to oblivion. Nobody's trying to hear what these black Greek groups have to say anymore. Nobody's going, oh, I can't wait to be a part of that. They'll look at these guys being fossils from a bygone era. But now the new voices of black media have become a going concern because we actually speak for the black street, and we're completely disregarding and discrediting white supremacist black misleaders. White power now fears the inevitable, and having rejected white power's quote-unquote leaders, black people are going to finally begin to choose our own. But worse than that, we're going to be demanding leadership. This is where things must go next. Who will help us to seize what rightfully belongs to us, and to ensure that we capture our part of the world? Since white power stole everything from us, of a necessity, this means we're going to have to confront white power and face them down and take from them what they took from us. We're not at that point just yet. We're not going to be there for a little while, but that's the road we're on if events continue developing in the way that we've been shaping them. That's the reason why you got all these Democrat mouthpieces out here. We scare them. You know they're screaming behind closed doors at Kamala Harris because she can't control us. And you know they're also screaming at those other black bootlicks. We thought you guys were controlling these niggers. What the hell are we paying you for? If you can't control them, these guys on the internet, they got more influence than you do. They're taking the black vote and leading them away from the Democratic Party, leading them away from the fraud of democracy in America, and they're deciding that they're going to demand tangibles for themselves. We can't do that. That's going to upset the entire racial pecking order we've depended on for 500 years. You guys got to get out there. Get them off this whole black empowerment thing. Get them off of it. Can't you reprimand them or something? That policy, that strategy, it will never work. Because you see, even though the majority of black people are not on black empowerment, the problem is when it comes to history, when it comes to any sort of societal movement, it's always a minority who changes the world. It's always a minority who acts as the living hinge upon which history turns. The reason that you don't see us trying to gather the biggest group is because we don't need the biggest group. Societies have never been pushed forward or changed by a majority. It's always been the people who get out there and hustle and makes the society change. And that's the reason why we've been effective. And that's the reason why you're not going to be able to find a way to undermine us. We've learned from the mistakes and the failures of the past. We've actually learned. The white supremacists haven't. They're still running the same old plays that they were running back in 1776. The white supremacist 1776 playbook, they were running the same stuff back in 1492. The playbook hasn't been updated one iota for them, but ours has. So if you think that what you're going to do is to go get a bunch of old retirees and a couple of moist intersectional types out there, if you think that's what you're going to do, that means you don't have a strategy. The black community is tired of being led around by the nose. This game was going to have to come to an end one way or the other, and now it's going to come to an end in a way that we want. When you have congressmen and governors and DNC chairs and white media outlets attacking us, what they're admitting to is they can't stop us. They tried to ignore us in the hopes that we would disappear and go away. But we didn't go away. We got bigger and stronger, and now what's happening is we're starting to influence events offline, events at the highest level. You don't get any higher than the presidency of the United States. You got a group of people who can make it where they speak, and a critical mass of black people, the black people who you need to be able to mislead when they say we will disengage. More importantly, that we are going to make it clear that we will put an end to the political careers and aspirations of those who have attacked us in the past. That sends a signal to all the political parties. The black vote is going to decide who becomes president, and that decision will rest on who it is who's going to correct the systemic economic injustices that black people have been subjected to. The entire experiment of white supremacy was nothing more than a gigantic worldwide redistribution of resources from those who had it to those who didn't even need it, and we're threatening to put an end to this whole racist con. So just know that before it's all over, they're going to be coming at us hard and heavy. They're going to have to. They can only ignore what we've been doing for so long. Howard Dean showed that. Bakari Sellers knows. The clowns you see on CNN and MSNBC, they're admitting, yeah, we know you guys are here. We know what you would say. Bakari Sellers, he might as well have said Professor Black Truth, Tariq, Tarian Rain, and all the rest of you black media types, you guys are horrible for how you're trashing our girl Kamala Harris. You know, on a level, I kind of feel like Bakari Sellers was pointing the guns at me in particular because I was going after Kamala Harris when she was running for the Senate. So yeah, Bakari, you probably noticed I haven't lit up on her. And the thing about it is, from now on, until she finally gives her concession speech, until she finally pulls out of the presidential race, I intend to stay on Kamala Harris's back. I intend to remind people all over the world about her sins. I'm not going to let anyone forget. And you can have all the press conferences you want where you can control the questions and make sure that she doesn't have to hear anything she doesn't want to hear and doesn't have to answer anything she doesn't want to have to answer. You can go right ahead and do all you want. That'll make you feel good. But as we showed last year with the 2018 midterms, it's not going to change the fact that the black vote's disengaged. So ignoring us is not going to be a solution. And if you think, well, we'll find some other way, we still have the enforcement arm of white supremacy, that's not going to help you either. We already know what it is you're going to try to do. Whenever the pain that we put on you becomes too great, you're going to try to use your white media and do a Bill Cosby, demonize your opponent. Let's tell people that these guys are evil, they're a bunch of sexists or terrorists or whatever. This, that, and the third. These guys, they're like borderline terrorists when you think about it. Wonder if law enforcement needs to get involved. Here Kamala Harris used to be a DA, used to be Attorney General of the largest state in the country. I'm sure she looked at herself all kinds of ways. Is there some way that I could put a stop to these guys through the law? Is there some way that we can get the police involved? Something that will stop them from saying all these things? How do we shut these guys up? Yet the white media isn't going to be able to shout us down. That game has run out. Black people are turning away from the white media. It's not because black people have disappeared. It's because they found new voices to listen to. Voices that will actually speak the truth. The black truth. Voices giving the exact opposite message of the white media and their black flunkies. This is the case against Kamala Harris. A case that she spent the last 25 years building herself. And for those of you out there in the sound of my voice, it's time for you to get engaged. You have a right and an obligation to get involved. You got to make it where Kamala Harris doesn't get to run from her crimes against the black community. She doesn't get to deny the sins that she's committed. You make it a point that wherever she goes, she holds her little press conferences or rallies. You make sure if she tries to do a town hall, if she calls herself doing any sort of online chats, you throw her record in her face. When the white media tries to burnish her laurels, you make sure to remind them of what an evil piece of trash she is at every campaign stop, at every press conference, and every campaign rally. She needs to hear what she did. The people that she's trying to lie to, they need to hear it. They all need to be reminded that the black community hasn't forgotten and never will. Anywhere and everywhere she goes, she needs to be confronted on it, because that's where the rubber meets the road. The white media thinking to themselves, we're going to control the discourse. We're going to make it where nobody hears it. Don't forget that you make it where wherever she goes, you put her on the spot. Make sure that if she calls herself trying to go to Roscoe's Chicken and Waffles, you be there and saying, what about all the black people you put in prison? What about the dirty cops whose records you concealed and kept secret? You make sure that that gets shouted at her whenever she goes in front of the cameras. There needs to be a few of us there ready to make sure that she gets confronted with it everywhere she goes. People need to see that yet again Kamala Harris has been confronted on her record as Attorney General and DA. Kamala Harris doesn't need to be merely embarrassed. Her political career needs to be demolished. She needs to be humiliated. She needs to be shown to the world as cowering from the questions so everybody sees her running from her record. It's so bad that nobody can defend it, not even her. She needs to hear it. The people she wants to deceive need to hear it. This is her record, and she won't be allowed to run from it. And the white media won't be allowed to cover it up either.